going off topic.
Off topic?
You really off topic right now. Yo, you way off topic? How is it that everybody's over here and you way over there off topic?
All right, greetings, family, and welcome to another episode of Going Off Topic with Brother Omowale. This is a platform where I bring on really dope content creators from across the spectrum, I guess, of content creation, right? Whatever your flavor of content creation is, if you are Black or African, right, and you are a content creator, you're someone who I want to hear from if you are creating dope content. So this brother who I have with me here today, Brother Ngwa, is someone who I've been following for a little while now on Instagram. The first time I think your content came across my timeline, a good friend of mine from out in LA, a sister by the name of Eve, was sharing some of your content, and I really appreciated the Pan-African nature of a lot of your projects. I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but I really have to follow him to see what his work is all about. And it just so happened that once we got this off-topic thing off the ground, you were one of the first folks who reached out just out of curiosity, and you said that you were interested in, having a conversation about some of the things that you were doing. And I was like, hey, that's a perfect match. So with that being said, fam, when we have these conversations, what I like to do is I like to just start by getting to know a little bit about the content creator. Right. And so we'll start there because I want to know a little bit about you. And then we'll talk a little bit about the content that you are creating. All right. Is that cool with you?
That's perfectly fine with me.
All right. Well, let's get started. So your name is Ngwa. Like, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about who you are as a person, as a man, and whatever else you care to share.
Okay. Well, my name is Ken Ngwa. I grew up in the city of, I grew up in Chicago. For the most part, I'm originally from Cameroon, which is a Central African country. I grew up in Chicago within an immigrant community of Cameroonians. And as of now, I'm a filmmaker. I'm based here in New York. I'm also the owner of a marketing and promotions company. I do media marketing in all facets, primarily focusing on small businesses, mid-tier businesses, and I help plan out marketing campaigns. And, I'm an all-around creative. I've been an avid backpacker. I want to say world traveler. It just sounds like world traveler. What is that? But avid backpacker. I've got a chance to see a lot of this beautiful world, and I use a lot of my experiences to create art and to infuse that in the film, infuse that in the music videos, infuse that in anything I do, just because it's who I am and it's a representative of, what I become.
Let me ask you a question, because I was reading in your bio that you came to this country at the age of 7 from Cameroon, and you lived in an immigrant community in Chicago. I believe the suburbs of Chicago, Calumet, if I have it correctly.
No, Calumet City.
Okay.
Calumet City all day. Yeah.
Listen, I'm not from the crib, as my Chicago folks would say. I'm not from the crib, so I might butcher a little bit of names. But that's around, I guess, the South Side somewhere in Chicago, right?
No, it's definitely the South Side. It still counts as the South Side. We have a bridge crossing from the South Side into the suburbs, quote unquote. But Calumet City, at the time I was living there, it was working class, Black, white neighborhood, and obviously because of everything that happened in the city, and it's unfortunately gone down in terms of like quality of life, but still full of beautiful people, good community. So for the most part, I grew up there, but then I spent most of my time in Chicago, in the city. I was in the city like from 16 and up. You couldn't find me anywhere in the burbs anymore.
Okay, cool. So listen, I know you have a film that's releasing in 2022 called Nature Boy that details the life of an immigrant kid growing up in Chicago. So we'll get into that towards the end of the film when we're dealing with the fiction. But now I want to deal with the actual reality. Growing up as an immigrant in Chicago, how was that experience for you in terms of your relation to the Black community here in the United States, but also being a big part, the immigrant community in Chicago. Like, how was that gelling of communities for you as a Black person within the U.S.?
I personally, I was a sponge. I was a sponge for everything that came around because, and only after leaving Chicago and coming to New York and understanding what a real non-segregated society looks like, that I actually appreciate and understand Chicago a little bit more. In terms of like the Black community, it was, I mean, at first, when I first got here, oh my God, I used to get made fun of so much at school just because I didn't know anything about hip hop. Your parents buy you clothes and you just go to school wearing whatever. So you're wearing corduroys, you're wearing dress shoes. Yeah, I said that, corduroys and dress shoes. And you go to a public school and like, yeah, go ahead, learn, do what you got to do. So having that experience and just, it makes you resilient, and it makes you like open to so many other cultures, because like, yeah, I grew up in Chicago, but it's still an immigrant community. So if I go home, some cousin, some uncle, someone from France, someone from Germany, someone from Belgium who's coming to America for the first time to make a life for themselves, they're staying with us. They're in the house. We have these community events on Saturdays and Sundays. We have a burial events. We have all of these things. So yeah, even though I'm in America, even though I'm surrounded by, all of this like Black culture exterior, like outside, when I come home, it's a different world entirely,
Yeah.
There's still French in the house. There's still all these other things in the house, which is just like, I wasn't eating Black American food. I wasn't in that world, and it was just my reality until I left.
All right. So I have some good questions here that I definitely want to delve into. Right. So, I guess the next question that I would ask is, wow, how do I phrase this? Because it's all right. So okay, so let me say this like off the rip, because I genuinely appreciate the fact that you talked about how you interfacing with African American culture made you very resilient as a Black person, because in African American culture, we have this thing that we do is called the dozens, right? So if you are different in any type of way, we gonna crack on you, we gonna roast you. But what a lot of people don't understand about that particular aspect of our culture is the dozens played such a big role, because it was our way of it was like the antidote, right, to protect you from like a harsh society, right? So it's like American society for Black people has always been a society that has been very it hasn't been kind to us. And I guess the way that we dealt with it as a collective was by not being very kind to each other in a very, I guess, humorous way. So we use humor that sometimes a lot of folks who come here from different places don't understand, right? I talk to a lot of my brothers and sisters from the continent, and they say, hey, well, they called me an African booty scratcher. And I'll say, bam, listen, do you know that Black people in this country were calling each other African booty scratchers before one immigrant even ever came here? So it wasn't particular to you. It was just a part of the culture. So I appreciate the fact that you talked about how your experience with that culture made you resilient, but more importantly, didn't make you hate African Americans, right? So I want to give you a round of applause for that. So I guess the next question is, growing up, right? You were born in 83, so I'm born in 84, so we're very similar in terms of generations.
Yeah.
How did hip hop culture and urban culture kind of like influence you? Because you said you're coming home and you're having this traditional experience with your community, with your immigrant community, but then you're going out and you want to dress hip, you want to dress fly, of course you want to get the girl. So how did that influence you as a young person?
Before I go there, I just have to like respond to something in terms of like you mentioned about like not hating Black American culture. That was never something on the table for me. Just like because of, I guess my upbringing, I was always open. I'm still always open to different cultures and learning about people. And I'm just very inquisitive, like, oh, wow, what's that place? I want to learn about this. This is just me naturally. So there was no hate there. But hip hop itself, I didn't know anything about hip hop. I'll be honest with you. I remember the first day, actually, I started listening to hip hop because it was like a monumental thing for me. Like, I remember Tupac had just died. And then I went to school and, I'm walking through the halls. And then all these girls are crying, and then people are just like, "Oh my God, Tupac died! Tupac died!" I'm like, "What is this? What's going on here?" So I'm like, okay. Then I look at the news, and people are talking about this thing. Then there's this album called Machiavelli, which is coming out, and I'm like, okay, Machiavelli. I got a little bit of money. there's no hip hop, there's no rap music allowed in my house. That's also number one, you know. So I'm like, all right, I take my little money, I go to River Oaks Mall, you know, I go pick up a cassette of a cassette, you know, of Machiavelli, the 7-Day Theory, and then I take that, I took it home, I put it on, and then my world was just like, this guy just died? Oh man, I get it now. You know, like it was like a moment where I was just like, you know what? Like it opened up my eyes to a bigger world, and I was just like, that was like my introduction into true Black American culture. Through that music, through the struggle music and hearing that. And I mean, I'd always listen to James Brown. James Brown to me was like, before rap, I was like, James Brown was everything in my house. Like my mom would tell me about James Brown when he came to Africa, like how like monumental that was. And I want to do a documentary about that at some point. But it was just like, as soon as it happened, I graduated from Tupac. From Tupac, I discovered Wu-Tang, and I'm like, what is this group? And then from Wu-Tang, I went to Tribe Called Quest. From Tribe Called Quest, I'm like, okay, do they have music here in Chicago? What do they play here in Chicago? Wow, Crucial Conflict, this and that. And I'm just like getting deeper and deeper into these different styles. And as I'm doing this, I think my Black Americanness is becoming more palpable to the outside world, you know, as much as that could be in the city of Chicago, I guess.
Yo, you know, it's funny because you mentioned your mother's affinity for James Brown. I have a really good friend who's also from a Black immigrant community here in Philly, but from Liberia. And his first name is literally Al Green. Right. And he's from an immigrant community, but it's because like during that time, Al Green's music like meant so much, I guess, to that particular community in Liberia. And I'm like, wow, like I was just so shocked to hear that story because he like typically, you know, our brothers and sisters who migrate here, like they have traditional names. I'm like, yo, your name is Al Green, and like, and you're an immigrant. Like that don't even make sense. But like when he told me the story, I was like, yo, that's actually a super dope thing, right? So listen, you mentioned filmmaking already, and filmmakers have a very special place in my heart. You know what I mean? As a budding filmmaker myself, I have an appreciation for my brothers and sisters who are in the craft, right? So when did you, I guess, get the bug or have the desire to go down that path of filmmaking? Is it something you always wanted to do, like tell stories and film became your medium? Like how did
to be honest, it was a gradual progression. When I finished, my last year of high school, I went back to Cameroon, and I happened to have a camcorder with me, and I just took videos and took pictures, and I was like, wow, I really like doing this. This is amazing. And from that experience, I put it down. I lost touch with it. It was just like, this is something cool. But every single day I had my camera, I was filming, I was shooting something. I was like, check this out. I even edited the video horribly looking back on it, but I did it. And I came back to the States. You know, within my community, my cousin had come to America, and he had stayed with us, gone to school, done really well for himself. And he had moved to LA, become like a highfalutin attorney. He's really, really big right now. So he moved out to Bel Air, and he was like, listen, if you want to come out to LA, you know, I can give you a job as a paralegal. You can come work for me, this and that. I'm like, okay. So I come to LA, and I ended up living in Bel Air. And in that environment, it's a whole nother thing. I start meeting all these rich Africans and affluent people who I'm seeing all around town. Like, oh, wow, that's Rihanna. Oh, wow, this is that person. That's cool. And I'm just in this world, like I'm flat broke. I'm like working at a law firm, doing this and that. And he goes back to Cameroon, and he's like, listen, I need you to watch my place. I have this person coming in to like rent the space to film something. And if you could watch it, just make sure they don't break anything. And the people who were coming in, they were doing something for Big Brother Africa. And so they come into the house, they're setting up these lights, and I'm just watching them like, wow, okay. And someone's like, hey, would you mind helping us with this panel? And I'm like, okay. So I helped them move a light into a place. And then I helped them do something else. And then I'm just watching the staging when they're getting the area together, because this was a very nice place. And I was just like, I really like this. This is really cool. This is something I'm enjoying. Then from there, you know, after it was all said and done for the day, I go online, I go on Facebook at the time and on Craigslist, and I'm like, wow, what else is happening around LA? I'm in LA. You know, maybe when I'm not working, I could check out some stuff. And then I start seeing these advertisements, and I'm like, wow, they need a grip for this. They need someone to do lighting for that. They need a PA. PA work was what I was doing for a significant amount of time. I've done PA work for documentaries. I've done AD work. I've done grip work. I've done pretty much multifaceted everything which is on a film set. I have some level of experience at, because I was always like, I just wanted to learn. I just fell in love with it. And from that experience of just being around film sets and being like, okay, I know how to work in a union role. I know how to work in a non-union role, even though, you know, I'm not union, but that's neither here nor there. I'm saying that I had a wealth of experience. And from there, I just learned so much, talking to other directors, talking to second directors, third directors. The first directors were always the ones in a huge project who you never get a chance to talk to. But the second director is the guy who's like, yeah, he's busy, but he might give you a few words of encouragement. And from that experience, I took that and sort of melded it into, you know, practical knowledge, and tried to, every time I look at a video, I'm like, okay, how did they do this? I sit back, I study, and I think, how could I do it with a lesser budget? How could I do it with just, you know, me? How can I like shortcut this? And I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I just, you know, practical knowledge, learning, trial and error. It's really all it came down to, just years of trial and error, and getting better and better, and then being horrible. I can't even stress that enough. Like I look back at some music videos which I did in the past, which were just like, oh my God, I can't believe I did this toilet water. This is not this is not the way that, you know, you're supposed to like even stage or like do a video. But now when I look at a music video, I'm like, the only thing that separates me from someone on a higher platform is simply budget at this point. Because it's like, okay, if you give me the budget, you give me the facilities to actually go out and do this. Je peux danser, I can dance, you know, I can go ahead and do my thing. And that's what I'm really confident about at this point.
That's what's up, man. You got to have that confidence to be great. So how old were you when you got your first gig as a creator, or either as a, you know, what did you call a PA is what you called it?
Yeah, PA. At the time, being a PA, I was pretty late.
What does PA stand for?
I'm sorry?
The PA, what does that stand for?
Like a production assistant.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I was I think I was like maybe like 24 at the time.
Okay.
I was 24 years old in LA, carrying lights, and so many practical experiences. I worked on this thing. They needed someone I was working on this French production for Channel 2, which is like a huge channel in France. And they needed someone to just like drive the van around. So I did that. And I remember one time the director, we were filming on this roof in downtown LA, and he wanted a shot. So he took the camera himself and he stood on the ledge. This is like no drone, stood on the ledge. And then he filmed that thing. And then he hopped down. And I'm just like, yo, this guy's crazy, but this is a good kind of crazy. And then even like we had another thing, we're filming, I don't know if you're familiar with the band The Doors. We're filming by the Whaler in Venice Beach and right by Jim Morrison's house, like literally right across the street from the house. So we're setting up shop, and I'm going up and down. This building had like maybe 5 flights of stairs, up and down, lugging heavy lights. I mean, like heavy lights, you know? It's not like, this is grunt work. And then at a certain point, the director comes over and he sees me and he grabs some lights as well and he starts taking it up there. And then from that experience, I never forgot that, you know, there's no ego in film. It's just community. There's no ego. There's just, and at least in true art, in true film, there should be no ego. Like whatever your role is, whatever someone else's role is, you put yourself out there and you do your best, and then you just work as a team. You come together as a family for a moment, and then as quickly as you became a family, you go your separate ways. But it's a beautiful experience, you know, all the while. And that's something which is like, you know, powerful. Okay.
So when you brought up your rich cousin, right, your well-to-do cousin in LA, you used the term he was coming to America, and it made me think of classic Black films, right? So let's talk classic Black films. You're from my generation, so if I start throwing out like, you know, like Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, Poetic Justice.
You're not gonna surprise me. Yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay, so along that, I guess the realm of classic black films, and I probably could, Harlem Nights and all those things as well. Like, what are some classic black films that really, I guess, influence you? You know what I mean? Like, hey, I would love to create something like that as a filmmaker.
Classic black films. Okay, you're gonna laugh probably when I say this one, but Five Heartbeats.
Okay, that's a classic.
I love the Five Heartbeats. That movie has just always been hilarious to me. Just like, the triumph over adversary, especially when Choir Boy goes through his whole thing and you can't sing like me. Like, just the whole like emphasis. It's a beautiful film. And I love the vibe. And it's just like, it's a feel-good movie. If you don't like that movie, there's something wrong with it. It's not a black story. I think it's a classic black film because it deals with rhythm and blues in the South and all these other things, but it's just a really good story. And just to be able to get across something higher than just race and just like touch people in a way where it's like, wow, like this is like, this is just humanity. And people see something like that and be like, I like this. That's what that movie represents to me. And that's what I really like.
That's dope. So let's talk about because you mentioned you were a backpacker, and like I said, I've seen your IG and I've looked at some of your past projects. So like, what does that passport look like? How many stamps you got on that passport?
Well, in terms of like travel, I've been I think maybe like over 30, 31, 32 different countries.
That's impressive.
But it's not like a typical person who would go and stay on a resort or do something like that. Like, no, like I've dived deep into like, hey, ending up at a house party in the middle of Argentina, like that kind of thing, like where it's like, okay, how did you get here? Who do you know here? This kind of thing. Like, just I've dived deep into cultures to the point where it's like I understand people and I understand like where they come from, and I want to learn. I'm like, what kind of food is that? What dish is that? That's amazing. We have something similar to that in Cameroon. Or we have something similar to that in Africa. Or I mean, in Guinea Equatorial, or what other country I've been to. It's like, just being able to see like puzzle pieces and seeing the whole puzzle when other people can't see the puzzle. Where it's like, oh, you guys do this over here. If you only knew what they were doing over there, it's so similar to this. You guys don't even like each other.
I was going to ask you that question because you've had the chance to engage with African descendant people throughout the diaspora, right? From Brazil to the US to Argentina. So like, what are some of those commonalities that have like surprised you? And like, based upon your travels and your experiences, like what was like an eye-opening moment that you've had that made you realize like, oh, wow, we really are one people, right? Like, can you speak to that?
There's so many things in terms of like, I've seen things which are very African American. I've seen things which are very African. My one instance I'll never forget. I was in Bahia with a good friend of mine, Pedro. Betchy, what up, man? I was in Bahia, and like this woman is cooking a dish on the streets, and then I walk up to her, and then I look, and I'm like, wait a second. She's making akra. Like, this is what we call it in Cameroon. This is what we call it in West Africa. It's akra, at least to us. But there they call it akaraje, So I'm looking at her cook this dish, and then I'm like, but she's cooking it wrong. And then I think to myself, like, okay, if I was far away from home and I didn't have all the ingredients and I didn't have red palm oil and I was in this country, how would I make this? And then I look at it and I'm just like, wow, I get it. This is what people had to do. They had to, like, if you're far away from where you come from, far away from what you know, and you want to make something that reminds you of whoever or wherever you come from, this is exactly how you do it. And then I hugged that woman as soon as she finished making that food, man. I was like, oh my God, it was just a powerful feeling.
That's super dope, yo. Because to one extent or one degree or another, right, we've all had cultural displacement, but we've also had cultural retention, right? There's certain things that we do that we've retained and we don't even realize, like, oh, this comes from that, right? The elements of the expression, they still remain, but it's when you start to examine them and you realize like, oh, the connection is actually still there and it's pretty deep. So I appreciate anyone who celebrates that or is curious to find out more about that. So okay, let me keep going here, right? I'm shooting these questions off the hip. It's a lot easier to do this when you have someone, a guest who's a very interesting person, and the fact that you've traveled a lot makes it a lot more easier to have the conversation. So, I guess the next question that I have for you: Are you married or?
At the moment, I am not married. Wait, not the moment. I'm saying no. I'm not married. No. I'm
Okay.
not.
Okay. So
Looking, but I'm not married.
this is a big question because I have a lot of friends.
I know where this is going.
From the continent.
Yeah.
Do you plan on going back to Cameroon to find a wife? Or are you looking for a wife within your culture? Like what's the game plan? Are you prioritizing Black or African women, or would you like to marry within your own culture instead of like interculturally?
Oh my God, this sounds like my mom. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like my mom and my aunt. Me personally, I'm not the typical African, quote unquote, African male, because I've been experienced in so many different things that I at times I struggle because I don't want to limit myself.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say limit myself to one woman, because that just sounds like ego. But the fact is, like, I'm multilingual, and I would just need somebody on that same level to be able to like communicate with, to be able to like express these the fact that I enjoy certain things. Like, I would love to be able to like, okay, let's watch this movie, let's check out this art, let's go to this place. So, I just have to. What I will tell you is that Cameroon is for sure in my future. I think that, growing up, I didn't understand like my personal background. There's actually a term for it. It's called being like a third culture person,
Mm-hmm.
where you like grow up like that. I think that I would want to maintain relations in Cameroon. I still have businesses which I'm working on there. So I think I'm trying to get to a point where I'm spending at least 20 to 30% of my time on the continent, and then the remainder of my time either in the States or in Latin America. But I'm trying to make that a reality, and I've been pushing for that, and God willing, that'll happen within the next year.
All right. Okay. So you talked a little bit about your businesses, right? So I know one of those businesses is a film company. You've developed a company, Sun People Productions.
Yes.
Okay. Help me understand that. Let's start with the name. Where'd you come from? What does the name mean to you, Sun People?
I've had a lot of people ask me, what is Sun People? Sun People, does it have something to do with race? Does it have something to do with that? It has something to do with race, but not in the way people would take it. Because, number one, it came from Andre 3000. I was a huge Outkast fan. Like, back in the day, I still am a huge Outkast fan. But, Andre once said, take Sun People, put them in the land of snow. And I thought about that, Sun People in the land of snow. I was in Chicago in the cold and this, like, desolate 0-degree winters, and I'm thinking like, what are Sun People? And this is us. This is who we are. But it's not just Black people. It's people who don't have a voice. It's the indigenous who don't have a voice. It's the people who don't get represented within America and who never have a chance. It's the Native American. It's the Choctaw. It's the person living in the mountains in Suriname who doesn't have a chance to have a voice and have an experience, be told, and see anyone who looks like him. Because in the media, growing up, it was just like, okay, there was no African representation. It's happening now, but I didn't see that. So I started thinking, okay, what do I want to do, like effectively to present where I come from? I'm not Nigerian, Nigerians are huge right now. The music, their art, Afrobeat, it's huge. But where can I represent where I come from and my own people and these cultures which I hold dear? And I thought of Sun People Productions. And it's just, I fight to represent indigenous people. And I don't mean brown people from South America. I mean, you could be from Bosnia. You could be from Yugoslavia. I'm more of a traditionalist where I enjoy sharing cultures of people who don't necessarily get represented, but like they have these rich traditions which have gone on for 300, 400 years, these little things which no one really knows about. And you just see it from a distance. You're like, okay, that's an immigrant. So my company really champions, like, you know, what we call American, these immigrants who are here, these people who are not here, who are in the developing world. I'm all about the developing world. Like, I have a deep love for the developing world. And it's like, at a point, almost a problem to me. You know, sometimes I look at my phone in the morning and it's like, okay, I'm getting a call from, where is this, Jamaica? I got a call from Colombia, somebody hitting me up about something happening in South Africa. Oh, I have this project you should come do in Uganda. And I'm just like, I love the developing world. And, you know, that's really what it is. That's what Sun People Productions represents. And I just try to find ways to elevate these cultures, elevate, if it's by working with an NGO to create a promotional video, if it's by working with an organization to help bring awareness to a subject, any way I can, you know, I'm there in a heartbeat.
You mentioned Suriname. Have you visited?
I've not visited Suriname, but I'll tell you why I said Suriname.
Okay.
Because actually I had dinner with an anthropologist who was telling me a lot about Cameroon. And anthropologist was actually talking about how at a certain point during the slave trade, that's another thing I hate to talk about slavery, even though it's very important. During a certain point in the slave trade, there was a lot of people from Cameroon who happened to be sent to Suriname. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they would run off into the mountains, intermarry, and live there. But he was also telling me about, like, wow, you can still find some of the pottery and the crafts, which you can find, like, in my own people, like in Cameroon, there in Suriname. So that's why I bring that up specifically, because I didn't forget that.
Yeah, no, the reason why I brought it up is because Suriname was a maroon nation, right? It was enslaved Africans who had escaped and developed, you know, a separate or maroon society, so to speak, similar to, like, I think it's Palenque and
Palenque.
Yeah, I think that it's a very, very similar. So I was going to ask if you've been there, just for a comparison of the cultures, because it is very interesting how all of this plays out. So you mentioned,
I haven't been there, but I've been to Palenque though.
Okay, okay. So if I start asking you about all your travels, this
it's gonna be a whole other
view of just so I'm going to try to, because I want to, you know, start to push back and have a bit of conversation about your upcoming project under, you know, the Sun People's production, right? But before I do that, you did mention representation, right? You said that for a time, like, African people weren't represented within film, right? So right now in the U.S., there is a lot of conversation. There's a group, you may be familiar with it, by the name of ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. And a big part of their frustration that they express is that when you look at, you know, films coming out of the mainstream or Black representation that you see on your screen, ABS, you know, I said ABS, ABC, CBS, NBC, typically the Black person seen there is not someone of African American heritage, right? And the argument is that these institutions, whether it be universities, you know, or Hollywood, are strategically looking to erase and displace African Americans, and are using some of our immigrant brothers and sisters in order to do that. Like, have you heard that conversation? Have you heard those accusations? And as a filmmaker and someone who's in the industry, like, how does that make you feel, like, hearing that particular conversation?
I have heard those arguments. I've actually heard that conversation. I've had that myself with a number of people. Number one, I think that, you know, it goes without being said that African people, new arrivals, I'll just say new arrivals in this country have benefited time and time and time again from the struggles and the pain and the suffering and the disadvantagement and the things which have happened to African American people. That goes without being said. Someone who comes here from Nigeria and can go to school with a minority scholarship, we benefit. There's no lie in saying that. But what people need to understand is, with that, there comes this complex of, like, oh, okay, well, he should be able to do what I can do because I was able to do it. Why not you? And then you have African people who come here and they're like, well, this person is lost. and they have this inferiority. I think it's something which has to do with human nature, where everyone always needs someone else to look down on and say, look at that one over there. He's the problem. This is why they're like that, because look at that. I don't believe that. I think that it all really comes down to, and I feel for Adas people, I personally, I can't speak for them because I don't know the struggle of it. You know, my whole, coming from Cameroon, we have a rich history of slavery. I mean, a rich, ridiculous, like we were slave traders. I looked into the history of this myself, so I can't even speak on that in terms of like feeling the pain and the brunt. I mean, we had our own pain to deal with, but I will say that we benefit from African Americans, and that in terms of like, there should be some kind of dialogue or program for people to better understand one another. Because truthfully, I know I don't want it just to be all kumbaya, but legitimately, we're all the same. An actor coming from Britain to come to the United States and do a part, they're looking at it like I'm Black representation as well. I'm not here to take your role. I have a similar Black experience. It might not be in the same thing, that the same way that you experience it, but it's still Black representation. Like I talked to this filmmaker, Joyce Prado from Brazil, and she talks about her relationship with racism. And I listened to her and I was like, this is interesting. And it's like, you don't get it. Different diaspora. That's just the way we end the argument. Different diaspora. And it's like, yeah, that's the best way you could put it. Because I'm like, but for me, I don't have this problem. And just so it's like different diasporas, we attack the power structure of the quote unquote whiteness, or quote unquote America, or quote unquote, you know, whatever the powers that be are, in different ways. And as soon as we can find a way to reconcile that with one another and realize that we're not each other's enemy, and that a person who looks like you or who has the same hue as you can have empathy for your experience without necessarily going through it, then, you know, we should just like, all right, cool. A British actor, yes. Put somebody else on from the South Side of Chicago, you know?
Listen, I appreciate that. So you spoke about the South Side of Chicago. I want to talk about Nature Boy here. I was reading a little bit about the work, and it's listed as an Afro-Surrealist reimagining of a Black immigrant growing up on the South Side of Chicago. So I guess the first question I have is, what does it mean to be an Afro-Surrealist? That's my first time hearing that term.
Afro-Surrealism, somewhat of a daze, somewhat based in actual reality, but some of the things which I filmed in there are just exaggerated experiences, which, you know, I encountered, just ways of me experiencing what my characters are going through without necessarily making it, okay, this is what happened. How about this is the sensation when this kid smokes weed for the first time and has this out-of-world experience among these people? Or how about he's coming to grips with life as a whole and he just has this internal vision? The idea of Afro-Surrealism is more about finding artistic ways to express the Black experience than an actual like, okay, this is what it is, this is what it is. It's open to interpretation. You can take what's on film and you can take it literally like this is what you see, or you can take it as a symbolic gesture, a symbolic representation of something even greater.
Okay, appreciate that. So before we go deeper into the film, into the characters, I want to talk about like shots, because you did let me see the movie, so I got a chance to check out a few of the scenes, and I noticed in one of the beginning there's like an opening scene, and I'm like, man, this shot feels very familiar. It feels like a Spike Lee kind of like influence shot here. So is that the case? Is Spike Lee an influence for your work or some of the angles that you're playing with?
I would say Spike Lee, Werner Herzog, those are like the two biggest influences. Because Spike, in terms of like the story of She's Got to Have It and how he did that guerrilla film on his own. And, you know, I'm here in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. So, you know, I got to represent and say that I'm a big fan of Spike. But the way I filmed that shot was primarily because that's how I experienced it on a daily basis. Like after living in Calumet City, we moved, you know, people established themselves in the United States. We moved to a affluent neighborhood in the suburbs of Chicago. And as like one of the only two Black families in the neighborhood, every single day, this is based on reality, I would get up and I would go to my car to go to school. Even having a car was a blessing, so I don't take that away from anyone. Being like a young kid having a car. So I'm going to my car, and every single day as I walk by all these vehicles, I hear doot, 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 doot. I hear the locks in the morning. I live in this neighborhood. It's like a daily ritual. Like, people are expecting someone to come and try to break into their vehicle, you know? And not to even say too much about myself, but my car was a lot nicer than the cars which they had. And that's a point I made in the video too, showing that, like, this is just like fear, the fear of the unknown for no reason. So a kid walking to school in the morning through your neighborhood, dressed up, going to his school, has to deal with this. And I wanted to purposefully show that to the people and show that this is another facet of growing up in America. This is another facet of growing up and experiencing this thing we call being Black in America, you know?
Yeah. So who is Nature Boy? Is he loosely based upon your own experience?
Loosely based on my experiences, loosely based on the experiences of my friends around Chicago, you know, partaking it. Listen, in Chicago, there's always been this big divide, specifically on the South Side. It's a very segregated place in terms of like Black, in terms of white, where you have a neighborhood which is very Irish, then you have another neighborhood which is very Polish, then you have pockets which are like either Lithuanian, Bosnian on the other side of the city, then you have like African American, then you might have one or two little areas which are just like, okay, predominantly African here, or little Jamaican pocket. But there's not, that's segregation. That's what I consider segregation, because it's not like, hey, we're all Black and we're all in one place. Even if it's that, it's like, yeah, you have that. You have Black places, but you also have like this separation of like almost down to nationality in areas within the city. And there are little pockets that once you get in there, you realize how divided this city is. So for me, Nature Boy, this experience of these kids riding through the city of Chicago during the 4th of July, the United States, quote unquote, birthday, and experiencing this world from the South Side to the North Side. This is the reality of that city and a little bit of the reality of America. You're entering this surreal reality into what it is to be, you know, in the United States.
Got you. So I know that this is the first, I guess, imprint on your Sun People's production. So how did the story come about? You started it back in 2018. I don't know when you finished the project, but I do know it's set to be released in 2022. But how did you get it funded? Like, was this a guerrilla kind of like Spike Lee from The Muscle to get it done? Like, how'd you go about it?
From the muscle, from the hand, like I grinded. Essentially, like at the time, I essentially worked, I saved up, and I have to give credit to a lot of the actors, because primarily, I don't want to admit too much, but a lot of the acting within it, I had a dearth of talent to pull away from. Some of these actors have appeared in The Chi, they've appeared in Empire, they've appeared in Jukin, which is a local Chicago show, which is like highly popular. And it's just, I was at the right time, because when I showed up to Chicago, coming back into the city after being in New York, I carried a little bit of gravitas, like, oh, wow, you're from New York. And even leaving New York, people were like, that's a thing. And people were willing to work with my project and like give their time and their energy. And and for the longest time, I've just been working and editing and color grading and making sure that the final project which I deliver is something which can make them proud of like the effort which they put in, and also make people proud to be like, yeah, I took part in that,
Gotcha. So what's next, right? You Nature Boy will be released in 2022, but you're a creative, right? I know I saw on your bio that you did a music video that Method Man was in. So like, what else do you have coming down the pike in terms of creative projects that you're excited about?
METHOD, man, no, yeah, that was like a crazy dream. Shout out to everyone over there at Wu-Tang, specifically, like, oh my God, the entire team of New Wu, amazing artists. You should definitely check out 2G Wu. It's a group made up of Intel and Power, and they were the ones who were able to organize that video with Method Man, and it was a really good look. I got a lot of press from that, and it was just an amazing experience. Next for me, let's see, I have this project which is called the Society Trek. It's actually a lot of my travels, I have taken footage and I've edited it, and I'm releasing it in snippets on Instagram and in snippets on my YouTube channel for people to just get an idea of a greater world out there. It's similar to like what Anthony Bourdain was doing with No Reservations, but it's from a different standpoint, because obviously not just being a black male, but I feel that in the developing world, I've been fortunate enough to be embraced in places where other people will be like, I can't believe you went in there and you survived. Like, I can't believe you went in there. And I work to dispel the fact that, hey, nothing is going to happen to you if you go there. People are people no matter where you go. You know, people are like, oh, it's dangerous. Absolutely, it's dangerous. The west side of Chicago is crazy. You know, the west side is unbelievable. But at the same time, you know, there are people who take their kids to school. There are people who go to the grocery store. There are people who dance, who make love, who like live these lives. So you realize that, and I'm just trying to break down barriers for people mentally and end that, you know, and that's what I do with the art. And that's what the Society Trek is for. It's just to show people other facets of the world, and just hopefully to show also my stylized cinematography and get an idea of like who I am as a person. Make people curious for other things which I have coming.
Okay. So I guess I'll give you one final question here. And I want you to think long and hard on this one. All right. So if you had an unlimited budget, but you were told with this budget, you can only create one project, you can only tell one story, and it's the last story that you could tell, what would that story be?
One story, and it's the only story I could tell. And
last story that you could tell was you've been given an unlimited budget, you know, to tell this story, but it's the only story. It's the only story that you can tell after you tell this one. What would that story be?
This is very dangerous, huh? This is a good question. I like this one. Okay, first, is it artistic or is it commercial? Because these are two different things. Because I have two answers for that. If it's artistic and it's commercial,
you can give me both. You can give me your artistic answer and your commercial answer.
Okay. Artistically, I would do a document. I don't want to say the name, but I would do a document, a biography about an African dictator as an artistic project, because I give people an insight into what other people are going through on the other side for here. So I'm not going to say the name, but I would do a biography of an African dictator for sure, because I would give like knee-deep insight in what the day-to-day world and how these people get to be that way psychologically, you know, coming from a political family as well, you know, I just things I see or stories I heard from my dad growing up. I feel that something like that would be, you know, eye-opening. Now, if it was commercial and it was like, hey, if you had the opportunity, I'd go for Black Panther. Because I think that honestly, I got some crazy ideas which we can go into, like animism, tribalism, and just like show a completely different side, like make voodoo acceptable.
Yeah, I like that. So
that's precisely it, and no hate or no disrespect attached to it, or no commercial. Well, there will be a level of commercialism because it's, you know, the machine, but taking it into a different area entirely.
Got you. Have you been able to, you know, receive advice? Because you mentioned Black Panther, and I know that the Black film world is a very small world. So is it Ryan Coogler is his name, right?
Yeah.
The other brother's name. Have you been able to get any advice from brothers in the industry who are, you know, directing and have access to big budgets? You know,
who are directing, have access? To be honest, I've met one or two in passing brothers, but I haven't had a chance to actually get like advice from them. There was this director who I met, Eugene Core. You know, he did the Prefontaine movie that came out like a long time ago on HBO. And he had also done like Miami Vice in the 80s, you know. And one day, you know, it was raining. We sat down, had a 3-hour conversation about film. And he's not a brother, but he gave me some of the best advice I ever heard from filmmaking. Just somebody who loves the craft and was just like genuinely, you know, amazing. He's like the director of the Berkeley Film Society, but really cool dude. And he gave me a lot of insight, you know, but I'm always open to learn more. I'm just trying to take my craft to the next level and hopefully do a studio film. That's where I'm taking my focus in my art. And I'm just trying to show like, hey, with a limited budget, this is what I could do. You give me the keys to dance. you give me the keys and the crew and the cast and the actual set list and everything to go, wow, let's play. It's the energy.
It's a wrap. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
And you just brought up animism. African spirituality is also something that's very important to me. What makes you want to make those traditions less demonized or rescue those traditions? Like, what do they mean to you?
It's twofold. Growing up in the West, you're taught to disbelieve, and you're given this material world. You have to go buy this. You have to go get that, and this is the world we live in here. But I've seen with my own eyes. I've seen like men who've gone out into the world and made vast fortunes and come back, and yet they still believe this, and yet they still are willing to go to these ceremonies, and yet they still hold close to these traditions. For me, it's more about tradition than anything else. You know, the older you get, the more traditional, at least the more traditional I'm becoming, and at least in certain aspects. You know, I'm super liberal in things, but like that, and just like I want to demystify it because I've gone to ceremonies, I've experienced real spiritual awakening, and I don't want people to think like, okay, there's something like this is good and that is bad, and Christianity is this and Judaism is that, and being a Muslim is this. It's not about that. It's about finding your own path and finding what gives you purpose and what brings light to your life. And if you want to go turn that fire, if you want to bring the fire, dance around the fire, beat the drums like your great-great-grandfather did, what is wrong with that? As long as you find some kind of blessing and some kind of like reality within that works for you. And for me, after seeing those ceremonies and hearing the drums and hearing them chanting and listening to people scream in the middle of the night to their maker or to whatever spirit, yeah, you can, you know, I'm good. Like I'm just a spiritual person, and that's what I want to like bring to people, because it's not just a black thing. There's people out there. There's people in Europe who have these traditions.
I have to. You are a brother after my own spirit, man, because I've had the experience back in 2018. I got to travel to Haiti with one of my I hate to use the term mentor, but Dr. Amamazama, and I had the chance to really be immersed in a few ceremonies, one of which was a ceremony for Ogun. And just the energy of it just really resonated with me. But one thing that I found as like I was watching this ceremony, because I grew up in the black church here in the United States, and I'm looking at the behavior, I'm like, man, this is very similar.
Yeah,
like what I'm seeing here in this is so similar to like what I saw growing up. And it's like, so I would love the chance to have an experience of like what you're talking about in Cameroon, right? Because I really want to experience these traditions throughout the diaspora and on the continent as well, because I have an appreciation for them. So just in closing, really quick, brother, just tell us, I want you to tell people where they can find you and support everything that you have going on. But I know you did mention to me when we were talking in the green room that you're currently working on a project as a campaign manager, a political project. If you want to speak to that at all, I'll give you the floor to share about that. So people can find out more about that work and anything else you want to share.
Thank you. In terms of marketing, you're probably going to see, if you live in the Virginia area, you probably will see my videos appearing, or at least my work appearing in the coming months. Her name is Latasha Holloway. She's running for mayor of Virginia Beach, and I guess she took a liking to some of the things I was creating in my message, and she hired me to come aboard her campaign. So I'll be creating, I'm actually on my way to Virginia the day after tomorrow to go down there and work on her campaign. But if you can follow me at Ken Ngwa, that's my IG, KenNGWA. It's like NWA with a G in there, so you know, easy to remember. Ken Ngwa. The name of my company, Sun People Productions, is on IG. I plan to do a lot of things here stateside, but more so in Africa, to especially with the tourism industry. That's like, I think that film and the tourism industry are two things which are like pulling and beckoning, you know, my creative juices. So in terms of people interested in going to Africa or And I'm not talking about Ghana or Nigeria. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you're talking about off the beaten track, off the beaten path, new places to see, I've traveled extensively throughout Central Africa, and I have a wealth of information I can help people with. So if you need help in that respect, or you want to check out my art, Ken Ngwa on IG, Sun People Productions as well. Follow me, like, subscribe, and I'm happy to work with you and build. And that's really what I'm about.
That's love, bro. All right, so listen, family, we just went off topic with our brother Ken Ngwa. He is an amazing Black content creator, an amazing creative. So please do go and follow and support everything he has going on. If you're here on the channel for the first time, please do hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe, and then we'll see y'all next time. All right, peace.
Going off topic.
Off topic.
You really off topic right now. Yo, you way off topic. How is it that everybody's over here and you way over there off topic?